Hey guys, welcome back to another video on the Simple Car Guy channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about all of the problems to expect on a Fiat 500. Fiat 500s, especially the Abarth version of the car, are some of the best driving small cars that you can buy in the United States. They sound phenomenal, they're unique on the road, and overall, just a fun car. It puts a smile on my face every time I build that boost from 10 pounds all the way to 18 or 20 pounds. It's a blast to drive. However, these cars are a little bit different from many other European cars that are made somewhat more, made somewhat better and more reliable. They're about as unique from each other as they are from those cars. And what I mean by that is that the build quality does vary from car to car. Not all examples are as robust or reliable as many of those European cars. Fortunately, the community is pretty good about being helpful when that help is needed. On the other hand, parts tend to be a little expensive for what the car is, and that's due to limited market and other issues in the United States market. Luckily, it's not too difficult to work on these cars. I've done a couple projects on this car, and it's nothing out of the ordinary, nothing too complicated, even for a small car. Now, let's dive deeper into the problems that you can expect on these Fiat 500s, and especially the Abarth version. To start with, we're going to look into the general items that are common on all models of the Fiat 500. So it doesn't really matter if you have the Pop, Lounge, Turbo, Abarth, or whatever other model. It's common among all models. We'll start with the interior parts, and on most cars, the trim starts to rattle within a few years. It's just what this car does. It comes loose, and whenever you drive over a bump, it's gonna rattle. In my case, my glove box is pretty much coming off. I also had to replace the gear shift knob and a few other things. It's just common on these cars, so there's not much you can do. Speaking of the radio area, a lot of the buttons, the paint on those buttons wears off. So you have to be really careful not to use your fingernails whenever you're changing stations, adjusting the volume, as the paint will wear off and it's not going to look as good. Of course, it's not detrimental to the functions of the car. It's still going to work properly. It's just not going to look as good, right? Also, I've heard that the lights behind the AC knobs tend to go out, and those are pretty difficult to replace. Once again, it doesn't really affect the functionality of the car, but it looks bad. And of course, the most famous item on the inside of the car is the armrest. Those things just tend to fall off. This car has gone through 2 or 3 armrests so far. I replaced it when I first got the car 3 or 4 months ago. It's already cracked, so I'm gonna have to figure something out, maybe reinforce it in a way or do something just so it stays on there. I do like having my, my arm kind of rested on there while I'm driving. Another item that I heard people complain about is the headliner. So, on the inside of the car within this area, it kind of, starts to peel off or hang or kind of get loose a little bit. So it doesn't look as good. Those can be glued back on, but that's something to look out for. Now, let's move on to the exterior issues that we can expect and see what those are. Now, I moved the camera for a reason here, and that's because you can see probably 2 or 3 issues just from this camera angle. You have to baby these outdoor handles. They tend to break pretty much all the time. At least that's what I heard from people and reading on the forums and Facebook groups and all that stuff. This one hasn't failed on me, but I've only had the car for a few months like I mentioned earlier. I'm pretty sure this car has had them replaced prior to this. Luckily, Amazon does have a repair kit for the door handle. So there's a hinge, I believe, somewhere in here that breaks off, and they're only about $11. So you can probably replace that yourself on the cheap. But it's something to look out for. Also, don't close these doors heavily. See how heavy that door is? It just kind of swings back, and that's that's fine. I mean, the car closes the door on its own. That's great. But people tend to slam these doors, and that's a big door for a small car, right? The problem here is that the window motor inside, right, the one that like rolls up the glass, actually fails from being smashed so many times. My driver's side actually works pretty well. However, on the passenger side, I cannot roll up or roll down the window. It's broke. So what I'm trying to say is that don't slam your doors. You will break something inside this door. Next thing we're going to move on to is the side skirt. So as you can see in here, mine is separated, and this is a very, very common problem that I see in these cars. I've actually tried using double-sided tape and putting one of those like bumper clippy thingies. It kind of came off. I drove it, left it in the sun, it got really warm, separated it, and the clip kind of came out on its own as well. So, that's something to look out for. Not too difficult to probably fix. I'm going to have to look for a better clip. Maybe I'll make a video about it, since it does seem like a lot of people are having this issue. Another item I wanted to mention is the bulbs. Obviously not just this one, but the headlights, and a few other bulbs, they just burn out prematurely for no apparent reason. I'm not really sure why, but they do. In the few months that I've had this car, I have replaced 2 fog lights, one headlight bulb, and one of these side indicators, I think, on the other side. So not really sure why it's happening, but it seems to be a common problem as well. Um, Also, if we would go all the way to the back, and I'll bring the camera to the back as well, there is no keyed lock on the rear hatch. It's only electronic, right? So you have to use your key. Also kind of an annoying thing. I'm gonna, go in here by myself and say that you have to take the key out if you're in the car, turn off the car, go in the back, and then press the button in order to open the trunk, or at least I couldn't figure out another way to do so, because the electronic lock doesn't work if the key's inside the car. But what happens is that those electronic locks tend to fail as well. Um, so that's something to consider as well. You definitely want to check that when you're buying a car to make sure the trunk or the hatch opens and closes properly. Uh, that's pretty much it for the external items, or at least the ones I have noticed and read about. There's probably some other ones, but that's it. Actually, there is one more. If you look at this roof, I don't think this is supposed to be so thin. Like I can move it with my finger without applying too much pressure. The next few items I wanted to mention are more mechanical and maintenance related issues on this car. I know that the intermediate steering shaft knock and replacement is very, very common on this car. I've done it myself. I have a video on it, so you can check that out if you have, a knocking noise whenever you kind of go left to right fairly quickly. So that's definitely very common. Also, there are a lot of wiring issues on this car, from what I've noticed. I'm not sure if it's common, but it does seem to be a little common on these cars. Um, First one was actually this one right here. So this, this stuff, whatever the covering or the harnesses, tend to crack. I noticed this one when I first got the car. There was a wire that's kind of like rubbed through the metal or rubbed on something, and all of this harness stuff is pretty much just crinkles off. I mean, look, it disappears. You touch it and it falls apart. So it seems to be a very low quality harness that's been used on these cars. So you definitely want to be careful. I also had an issue when I was replacing the light bulb on this side. When I opened the actual headlight itself, I noticed that there's kind of like a burnt mark on the wiring harness that's attaching to the bulb itself. So it seems a little bit dangerous, so I've been checking a lot of the wiring stuff on the car just to make sure that it's not, common on some of the bigger, more kind of dangerous wires. While we're here under the hood, some of the other items I wanted to mention is that you have to change the oil on these cars at least every 5,000 miles. I mean, I believe you should do it on every car, but these Abarth versions do tend to drink a good amount of oil. So you definitely want to change it pretty often, and if you don't forget to check your oil. I would check it every time you fill up. That's very easy on this car. You just pull it out, check, see if you have enough oil, and maybe carry a quart in your car. I've read that a lot of people have been basically burning through a quart of oil in between oil changes. It's not really unheard of with these cars. You also tend to need to change the spark plugs about every 25,000 miles. Those kind of go bad in, like I said, 25,000 miles or so. The timing belts are supposed to last 150,000 miles or so, but unless you have warranty, I would suggest changing it earlier. If you're nearing the 100,000 mile mark on these Abarths, don't don't wait. just change the timing belt. It's probably gonna save you, a lot of time and hassle in the future. Now let's get to the back of the car and I'll show you a couple other maintenance related items. There are just a couple things here in the back that I wanted to mention, and that this car pretty much chews through tires. One thing you can do is to rotate your tires a little bit more often. That way at least the wear is even and you can prolong the life of those tires. Another item here in the back, and related to the wheels and tires, is that the wheel bearings tend to start making noise after 30-40,000 miles and need to be replaced, as well as the rotors. Those for some reason wear out much quicker than you'd expect from a light car like this. For the last part of the video, I just wanted to concentrate on the Abarth version of the car, since this is the car I own and have the most experience with. Some of the items that I've experienced myself are the CV axle boots that seem to be kind of falling apart. I replaced both of them on my car, but they tend to tear up pretty often on these cars, and the grease comes out, makes a huge mess inside the wheel well. As well as obviously putting the actual CV joint in danger, because mud and all that stuff can get in. Some of the other items is that you really need to check the multi-air filter and make sure it's clean. If it plugs up, the engine's going to be trash. Not only that, you want to change the actual filter, the multi-air filter, every 50,000 miles, as those multi-air units tend to fail. So you want to protect it as much as you can by doing those preventative maintenance. I have also heard people complain about the top bushings for the front suspension, which tends to go out after about 5 years of use, as well as the top strut mounts. Other than those suspension issues, you can also expect stock intercooler to have some boost leaks, and as well as other boost leaks, which aren't very uncommon on these cars. These cars also go through brake pads like it's their job. I've seen a lot of people, replacing them every 10, 15, 20,000 miles, which seems a little too often for a light car like this. Some of the turbo management components also have issues, such as the wastegate actuator, the diverter valve, the vacuum lines. So these cars do have, a few of those engine type of issues. As far as leaks, these cars aren't really known for a lot of oil leaks, but you do want to check the valve cover around the spark plug. So there's like a spark plug seal that may be leaking a little bit of oil, as well as the air oil or air to oil separator can. And if your gear shifter feels loose, your shifter cable bushings might be worn out. That's pretty much it for all of the major issues that you can expect on these cars. I just wanted to mention a couple other things, and that's never overfill this car whenever you are at a gas station. What can happen is that you will pretty much wreck your carbon canister and cause evap issues. So don't overfill it. When it clicks, the first click after your 11, 12 gallons or whatever it may be, leave it at that. Also, I really prefer using 91 or 93 octane on this car, as it tends to perform better. It cleans the engine better in my opinion, and the car just lasts longer on good quality gas. So that's about it, guys, for my video on all the problems to expect on these Fiat 500s. I hope you found it useful. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.